Alright, you guys, let's can some butter. Okay, so some of you out there are going, alright, why in the world would I can butter? Well, not all of us have refrigeration all the time. I grew up and lived a lot of my life off and on without a refrigerator. As you guys might have known, if you have watched my channel for any length of time, I lived in my van for a very long time without a refrigerator. And sometimes, you know, it's better just to put your food up and put it in a pantry on a shelf rather than try to freeze everything. Because as far as I'm concerned, my freezer is for meat and it's for ice. And the occasional ice cream if somebody wants ice cream or, you know, whatever. It's not for stuff that could go in a can or a jar. So there you go. Now, some people say that you could keep your butter for 5 years in a jar like that after you've canned it, maybe. But I always tend to err on the side of around 18 months, maybe a little bit longer, maybe 2 years on the outside, just because the mason jar lids that we have in the United States, that's what they say on the box. That's what I go by. This little box right here, it says lasts up to 18 months. So that's what I go by. Also, we go through butter pretty fast, so it's not going to last that long anyway. So here I'm going to show you guys the stuff that you need to do any kind of canning project, no matter what it is. I don't care if you're canning peaches, I don't care what it is that you're canning. All this stuff is pretty much standard, pretty easy. So we're going to start off with the tools that you need, and then we'll get right into it, okay? All right, so some tools that we're going to need. First of all, you're going to need some oven mitts or oven gloves. I like to use oven gloves, obviously, because look how dirty they are. I use them all the time. You're going to need a pot. Any pot will do, as long as you can submerge whatever you're canning in the boiling water. Something to keep the pots, keep the jars off the bottom of the pot. It can be a trivet. It can be one of these. It can be something that comes with your canner if you do have one of those fancy canners, but trust me, you don't need one. Yeah, and you're limited to whatever space the thing has in it. And if you guys have ever canned with one, you know what I'm talking about. You also need tongs to lift your jars out, because trust me, even with a fancy canner, you're not going to want to lift them all out at once. At least I don't. So I always use my little tongs there. And these are old. They're antique. They're not going to look exactly like what you see here. They're going to be slightly different, but they're basically the same thing. You can buy them at Walmart or any place that sells canning supplies. You're going to need your jars. Now, if you buy your jars brand new, they come with the rings and the lids. You know, and they sell them by the case. This is a really good deal. I think I paid like $13 for this, and there's 12 jars in here. So that's over $1 a jar, but you get the lid and the ring with it. So that's a good deal. If you reuse your jars, you're going to have to buy at least some lids, if not both lids and rings. So you can buy those separate so that you can keep using your jars indefinitely. And also on that note, the rings, like I said, and I'm going to say this ad nauseum, the rings are reusable until they rust or are dented, but the inside part of the lid is not. Okay, you cannot can with this again. You can use it for storage in your fridge or something, but do not can more than once with this, because you're not going to get a good seal and your food's going to spoil. So what I do if I want to reuse these guys is I mark them with an X, so I know that I've already canned with them, or somebody's already canned with them, and all they are is for like a Tupperware or a storage deal. They're not going to be for something I want to keep up on a shelf. And again, these things last for 18 months. You can probably do it for around 24 months if you're pushing it, but that's what the manufacturer says. That's what I'm going to go by. You know, later on I'm going to show you what it looks like when they're sealed. So if you guys want to take the risk and extend it out longer, that's up to you. But they give you a little space right here to write a date on them. Our stuff never lasts that long, so I never even write on it. So that's another indicator. Oh, I've already canned it. You know, just write the date on there when it was put in there, or put a label on it or something. That way you know it's already been used. And on top of that, you know how long that thing's been sitting up on the shelf, because you really don't want to eat something that's really old. It's hazardous to your health. So yeah, just make sure that you basically stay within the guidelines if you can. If you want to risk it, that's up to you. But yeah, I don't know. And like I say, we always use up our canned goods way faster than 18 months anyways, so I don't even worry about it. We usually use stuff within a year. So that being said, this is basically it. It's a really simple process. You don't need that many tools. And so let's get to work. Okay, so the next step is you have to get your jars nice and hot. People think that this is sterilizing your jars. Not really. It's basically making it so that they aren't shocked by the temperature change. So they get to slowly heat up and keep them from breaking. The sterilization part comes later, but just so you guys know, if you've never canned anything, you have to basically give your jars a nice little bath. So what I like to do is I like to just clean them out really good first, especially if they've been used. And then I just submerge them in this pot, and as you can see, they're fully covered with water. And I will let this come to a boil, and then after that, then we'll get down to business. Make sure you let your butter sit out overnight to get soft. Otherwise, this next step is going to be pretty hard. And you don't want to melt your butter first. At least I don't. And yeah, just make sure that it's, room temperature and soft. And as you can see, I cut it with that rubber spatula, so it's ready to go, I think. Okay, so as you can see, the jars are in boiling water now, and that's what you want. Sometimes I let it get to like a roaring boil where like it looks like water volcanoes are coming out of the water, but that's really not necessary. Basically, like I said before, you just want to heat your jar up so like it's not going to bust on you when you put it back into the water to boil it the second time. And also sometimes if you're making jams or jellies or soups or whatever, the liquid that you're putting into the jar is hot, so you don't want to expose your jar to heat and cold extremes like that. In a perfect world, if they made canning jars out of borostylite glass, then we wouldn't have that issue. If you are lucky enough to find such a creature, then more power to you. You don't have to do this laborious step here. But the rest of us, we have regular old glass canning jars, so the best thing to do is just heat them up first. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tongs here, and I'm just going to attempt to lift this out of here on camera and not burn myself. And you just dump the water out, and then you take your jar over to where you're going to fill it, and very carefully you put it down on something like a trivet or a cooling rack, and the jar will stay hot for quite a few minutes, and you just fill it up with the stuff that you're going to put in it. Doesn't matter what you're canning. You can turn the burner off on your stove because this water is going to stay hot for quite some time, and then you can start filling, and I will show you that in the next clip. And I like to take my oven glove here and pick my jar up because this is easiest for me, and basically scoop the butter in, and it's no big deal. It just kind of goes in there, makes a big mess everywhere, but I think it's less messy than melting it first, because it's hard to pour that out of your pot and not make a humongous mess everywhere at the same time too. And what I like to do, like I've probably stated before, is I like to just leave some headroom in the jar so that it has room to do whatever it needs to do. And then I just repeat. Okay, so the next step to this process is pretty simple. You're basically going to wipe off the tops of the jars. And this is very important because you want nothing on here. You don't want your lids to not stick. If there's any food or anything on here, there's a big possibility that your seals are not going to work. So it's very important to do this. Do not skip this step. I don't care if you think that you didn't get anything on it. I don't care if you're the safest, most careful person in the world and don't make any messes ever. It doesn't matter. Still wipe down this rim of your jar to make sure that there's nothing on here. Okay, the next step's pretty easy. You just basically put your little lids on your jars and kind of set the ring over and screw it down a little bit. You can get it pretty tight, but not so tight that you can't get it back off. And it's pretty simple, easy to do. Stick it on there. And if you've wiped the rim like I told you before in the last step, you shouldn't have any problems with these. They should be just fine. And they should be pretty airtight. I mean, I haven't had anything escape ever. So, just put them in there. And your jars are cooled off a little bit by now, but they're not as cold as they would have been if you hadn't boiled them first. Plus, that probably gets some of the bacteria off of there too. Who knows? Okay. Hey, the next step is an obvious one. Basically, put the jars back in your bath here. Yes, the technical term is bath. You're giving them a bath. Just stick them in there. Okay, once you got them all in there, you're going to turn the heat back on. And you can turn it on high, and you're going to let it boil again. And once it starts boiling, that's where the important thing comes in. You got to time it for 15 minutes. It's got to boil hard for 15 minutes. Alright, so while I'm waiting for the water to boil again, I'll explain to you the reason why it has to boil for 15 minutes. That's to get rid of all the bacteria. Supposedly, from what I've read and from what I've experienced canning stuff my entire life, 15 minutes at boiling water temperature, whatever that is, I can't even remember what it is right now, will kill all the bacteria, and then you won't have to worry about that. Also, I think it probably helps to activate the little wax seal or whatever, or rubber or whatever the heck it is on the inside of the lid of the jar. So it'll you know, basically stick to the jar and create a seal. It also makes sure that there's no air left inside. What happens is the temperature creates a vacuum. As soon as you pull the jar out of the boiling water, it sucks all the air out and basically like burps it, like what you do with a plastic bag or a like a Tupperware container when you're trying to take out all the air. That essentially creates a vacuum, and it just goes whoosh, it sucks it right out. So that's the things that you want to happen. So in order for that to happen, it has to get up to a certain temperature for a certain amount of time. So that's why you need to not skip that step. You always have to boil stuff for 15 minutes unless otherwise stated. Like if you're going to be canning meat or something like that, you're probably going to be doing it in a pressure canner, and you're going to be doing it for a longer period of time. But if you're just doing regular pot boiling, canning, 15 minutes is basically the rule for pretty much everything you're going to can, whether it be pickles or juice or soup or whatever. Okay guys, you see that? It's boiling really good now. That's what you want. So you set your timer for 15 minutes and keep it going. Alright guys, so it's been 15 minutes, and be very careful. Your water's still going to be boiling after you turn it off, obviously. Safety first. Alright, pull this jar out. As you can see, The butter is melted in there. You just set it gently on your cooling rack or trivet. And that's basically it. Just pull them out. Kind of dump the water off the top. And as you can see, it almost looks like ghee because it was melted. And as you can also see, none of it escaped into the water because I wiped the rim off of the jar and I put my little lid on there and screwed it down. So you don't have to worry about that. Just pour that off. And like I said in the ghee video, you can can ghee as well. You don't have to just can butter. You can can ghee. Especially if you're going to store it for a really long time. It's just not really necessary to can it because ghee lasts pretty much forever, even without a refrigerator. And you just let them sit there. And I like to let this stuff cool for overnight. Doesn't matter what I can. I just let it cool overnight. And then I take, you know, a rag or something like that. And I just wipe the water off. If it'll come off. This rag doesn't really absorb very well. And I just let it sit there. And what's happening right now is the temperature change, like I said before, is creating the vacuum. And so it's sucking out what little air is left in the jar. And it's sealing itself. And eventually, not every time, but most of the time, you're going to hear the jar ping when it cools off enough. And that means it's sealed. It'll literally make like a little ping noise. Those of you who've canned before, you'll know what I'm talking about. This jar back here probably won't because it looks like it's already sealed. Sometimes they just seal themselves and they don't ping. If your jar doesn't seal, that's okay. No big deal. Just eat that one first. And you'll be able to tell because there's like a little button. I don't know. You could probably see it on that one. The little button stays up. And it's not sealed. You basically can feel and hear air underneath it. That's how you know it didn't can. And like I said, that's okay. Just put it in your refrigerator or whatever and eat that one first. The rest of them, if they're sealed, then you just put them up on your shelf and they'll last, you know, a couple years. 18 months to 24 months, depending on what type of canning jars you use. And yeah, these I highly expect within the next few minutes to do their little ping thing, and they'll all be sealed and ready to store. Oh, did you hear that? That one sealed itself. They just have to cool off enough and then they'll start doing it. Okay, so the jar is cooled off a little bit. Let me show you. You can push on it and it's hard. It doesn't do anything, and it's kind of slightly concaved like this. And the little button that I showed you before, it's gone. You don't see it anymore, do you? Yeah, this thing is sealed and it's ready to go. All right, you guys, that's me canning butter, but you can use that to can just about anything. Just make sure you do your research, and there's plenty of recipe books and things on the internet that you can find out there. But I just wanted to give you guys a little heads up and an idea, and yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Talk to you on the next one. Bye.